They laughed when they saw the dog chained by the school fence. Just a scruffy German shepherd, dirty paws, ears twitching in the heat, nothing special. But what those teenagers didn't know was that this helpless stray had once brought down armed criminals with nothing but instinct and training. And when they picked the wrong moment to mess with him, they unleashed a side of the dog that only the most dangerous men had ever seen. You ever look at a dog and think, asterisk, ah, poor thing, probably just needs a home? That's exactly what these kids thought. To them, he was just another stray, chained up and forgotten. But this wasn't just a dog. This was Rex, a retired K-9 officer who'd spent years sniffing out danger and taking down threats without hesitation. And that day, when a group of bullies decided to turn him into their latest joke, they didn't just mess with the wrong dog. They messed with a protector, a fighter. And what happened next? It changed everything. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon when the trouble started. The sun had barely begun its descent, casting long golden shadows across the cracked sidewalks of Pinecrest Middle School. Students were just beginning to pour out of the building, their laughter echoing in the air, backpacks slung lazily over their shoulders, homework already forgotten. But behind the old, rusted chain-link fence near the edge of the parking lot, a lone German shepherd sat in the shade. To most, he looked like just another stray. His thick coat was a little dirty, his ears stiff and alert, and a faint scar traced the line of his jaw, the kind of detail you'd miss if you weren't looking close. He didn't bark, he didn't growl, he didn't flinch when students passed by. He just sat, watching, waiting. Some kids called him Shadow, others called him Beast. No one knew where he came from. He wasn't wearing a collar. He never chased anyone, never begged for food. He just showed up every few days and settled near the old fence like it was his post. But for a certain group of teenagers, his quiet presence wasn't peaceful. It was a challenge. Liam, Kyle, and Trevor were known around school for all the wrong reasons. They weren't the kind of bullies that threw punches in the hallways or stole lunch money. No, their cruelty was more calculated and quieter. The kind that slipped beneath the radar of teachers and adults. The kind that made people feel small just for existing differently. And today, the dog was in their line of sight. "Yo, there he is again," Trevor muttered, nodding toward the fence as they rounded the corner, still guarding that old patch of dirt like he owns the place. Kyle smirked. "Bet he's just a mangy mutt. Probably sleeps in a dumpster. Let's go say hi." Liam didn't say much. He rarely did. But the slight twitch in his jaw and the glint in his eye said he was already in. Together, the three made their way toward the fence. The dog didn't move. "He's not even doing anything," Kyle scoffed as they stopped a few feet away. "What's he think he is? Some kind of superhero?" Trevor picked up a pebble and tossed it lazily toward the shepherd's paws. The stone landed inches away. The dog's ears twitched, but he didn't flinch. "Creepy how he just stares like that," Liam finally said. "He's not even scared." Kyle grinned. "Let's see how brave he is." They stepped closer. Another pebble. This one hit the fence, making a metallic clink. Still no reaction. The German shepherd stared straight ahead, like he was looking through them, unbothered, unimpressed, unmoved. And that, more than anything, irritated them. "He's chained," Kyle said, noticing the thick lead attached to the post behind the fence. "Can't go anywhere." Sitting duck. They didn't know how wrong they were. They didn't know that Shadow wasn't just some stray that wandered in off the street. They didn't know he had once charged through flames to drag an unconscious officer out of a burning house. They didn't know that his nose had tracked down armed fugitives through miles of forest. They didn't know that the reason he didn't bark was because he didn't need to. For days earlier, miles away from the schoolyard, Officer Jake Morales sat silently in his kitchen, nursing a black coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. His uniform hung over a chair nearby, but he wasn't getting ready for work. Not anymore. The living room was filled with boxes, some half open, some taped shut. The walls, once covered with medals, photographs, and framed newspaper clippings, were now bare. It didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a memory. In the middle of it all, lying on a folded blanket by the patio door, was Rocco, the same German shepherd now sitting outside Pinecrest Middle. But here, in the quiet of this house, he looked different, peaceful, calm, like he understood this goodbye was coming, even if it wasn't fair. Jake watched him for a long time, his chest heavy with the weight of a decision he didn't want to make. Rocco had been his partner for 6 years. 6 years of patrols, takedowns, chases, rescues. 6 years of being side by side, through gunfire, storms, and quiet night shifts. Rocco had saved his life more than once. And now, due to department funding cuts and his own forced early retirement from an on-duty injury. Jake couldn't afford to keep Rocco with him. The department had offered to rehome him, maybe to a farm or a family in another county. But the idea of Rocco being sent off like a piece of equipment broke something inside Jake. "I'm sorry, boy," Jake whispered, crouching beside him. "I didn't want it to end like this." Rocco nudged his hand with his nose, like he always did when he knew Jake was hurting. Jake knew he had to find a better option, a real one. Rocco wasn't just a dog. He was a soldier, a partner, a hero, and leaving him behind like he was nothing, that wasn't happening. So when a friend from another precinct told Jake about an old fenced-in training lot near a school, and used and forgotten, Jake came up with a plan. He'd bring Rocco there temporarily, just until he could figure things out. It was risky, he knew that, but Rocco wasn't a risk. Rocco was safer, smarter, and more disciplined than most officers he'd ever worked with. He'd be fine, for a little while. Back in the present, the boys hadn't left yet. In fact, they'd gotten bolder. Trevor had found a stick, and was poking it through the gaps in the fence. "Come on, do something," he teased. "You're all bark and no bite, huh?" But Rocco didn't respond. He just kept watching. That stillness, it wasn't fear. It wasn't confusion. It was calculation. And it should have scared them, because every second they underestimated him was another second he was memorizing them. Their faces, their smells, their patterns. He'd been trained for this. Anticipation, patience, let the enemy move first. The school bell rang again, this time for late buses and last-minute pickups. Most kids had already disappeared, but Kyle, Liam, and Trevor still lingered. They leaned against the fence, acting like they were just killing time. But really, they were focused on one thing, the dog. "Seriously, he's not even blinking," Trevor muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "What is wrong with him?" Liam crouched down, pressing his fingers through the chain link. "I bet he's been abused or something. Dogs don't just sit like that. He's broken." Rocco's eyes flicked to Liam's hand. 1 second, just one flicker, barely noticeable, but it was the first real movement they'd seen, and it was enough to give Kyle an idea. "Let's test him," Kyle said, his voice dropping into that smirking tone he always used before something reckless. "I saw a bag of leftover burgers behind the cafeteria dumpsters earlier. Let's see if he's as tough as he looks when there's meat in front of him." Trevor grinned. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" "Yup," Kyle nodded. "Let's bring it back and dangle it just out of reach. Make him beg, or freak out. Either way, it'll be fun." Liam didn't say anything. For a moment, he looked unsure, but then he followed them. 10 minutes later, they were back, a grease-stained paper bag in Kyle's hand, and the unmistakable smell of old meat drifting from inside. Trevor held his phone up, already recording. "All right, Shadow," Kyle sneered. "Let's see what you're made of." He reached into the bag and pulled out a half-eaten cheeseburger, the patty cold and sagging, the bun soaked through with ketchup. He dangled it over the fence, letting the scent drift toward the dog's nose. Rocco didn't move, not a twitch. He didn't sniff. He didn't drool. He didn't even glance at the food. Kyle's smirk faded slightly. "You gotta be kidding me." Trevor zoomed in on his phone. "Dude, he's like broken or something. This is creepy." Kyle leaned in further, waving the burger right in front of Rocco's face. "Hey, you hungry, mutt? Huh, you want this?" Still nothing. Liam shifted on his feet. "Maybe we should just leave him alone, man." But Kyle wasn't listening. He pulled his arm back, winding up like he was going to toss the burger straight at the dog's head. And in one blur of motion, Rocco stood. It wasn't slow. It wasn't a growl building up to a bark. It was instantaneous. One moment he was a statue. The next he was on his feet, ears pinned, chest out, tail rigid like a spear. His front paws hit the chain-link fence with a deafening clang, and his body snapped with military precision. His teeth bared, not in a wild, rabid dog way, but in a precise, controlled snarl that told a much deeper truth. This was not a stray. This was a weapon. The burger dropped from Kyle's hand. He stumbled back, nearly tripping over Trevor, who had stopped recording and was now pale as a ghost. "Dude, what just happened?" "I told you," Liam said, his voice cracking. "I told you something was off." But they didn't run. Not yet. They couldn't take their eyes off Rocco, who now stood like a statue again, still as death, just behind the fence, watching, judging, waiting. A teacher's voice suddenly echoed from the parking lot. "Hey, you boys, what are you doing over there?" They all jumped. "Nothing," Kyle yelled, grabbing the burger bag and shoving it behind his back. "Just heading home." And they bolted. No more teasing, no more laughing. But what they didn't know was this. Rocco wasn't just reacting to the burger. He was responding to something else entirely. Scent, tone, intent. He didn't need a command to act. His instincts, honed over years of service, knew how to interpret threats. He didn't attack because he didn't need to yet, but deep in his brain, Rocco had made a decision. Those three were not harmless. They were a potential threat, and threats were never ignored. Later that night, back at Jake's place, the house was quiet. Rocco had returned like he always did, slipping away from the schoolyard just before dusk and trotting home along the wooded trail that lined the outer edges of the neighborhood. Jake was surprised to see the edge in Rocco's eyes when he walked in. "You okay, boy?" he asked, crouching to check for injuries. "Did something happen?" Rocco gave a low, short huff, almost like a sigh. Jake didn't know what had happened, not yet, but Rocco had already begun to file the encounter away in his mind. He remembered the scent of each of the boys, the exact pitch of their voices, the rhythm of their steps, their posture. That was the thing about K9 dogs, especially ones like Rocco. They didn't forget, not threats, not smells, not people who got too close. Liam came to school with a different energy. He kept glancing at the fence from a distance, but didn't go near it. Trevor made jokes, but they were quieter now. And Kyle had been silent all morning, his usual swagger gone, because while they'd laughed before, they weren't laughing now. They hadn't been able to sleep. That image of the dog exploding up like a missile, the sharp snarl, the glare that cut right through them, it haunted them. And the worst part, that dog hadn't even tried to hurt them. If he had, they knew exactly how it would have ended. But this wasn't over, because Kyle wasn't the kind of kid to take a warning and walk away. In his mind, that dog had embarrassed him, challenged him, made him look weak in front of his friends. And Kyle didn't let things go. Not ever. Kyle spent the next few days watching from afar. He'd hang back near the schoolyard after classes, waiting for a chance to get close to Rocco again. But the dog never gave him a reason. No barking, no growling, no reaction, just silence. But Kyle was patient. He wasn't about to let this dog outsmart him. He was determined to find a way to prove he was the one in control. One afternoon, after school let out, Kyle noticed something unusual. Rocco didn't walk home the same way he usually did. Instead of heading straight down the wooded path, the dog lingered near the old warehouse on the edge of town, a place known for shady business and late-night trouble. Curious, Kyle followed. He crept behind the warehouse, staying low, careful not to be seen. Rocco was sitting quietly near a rusted metal door. His ears twitched as if listening to sounds no one else could hear. Suddenly, the dog stood up, his body tense, and he started sniffing the air again, this time with focus. Kyle's heart pounded. What was this dog doing here? Why come to a place like this? He moved a little closer. Just then, a group of men appeared from the shadows. They were rough-looking, wearing dark hoodies, and carrying heavy bags. One of them had a flashlight, which flicked erratically as they talked in low voices. Rocco didn't move from his spot, but his eyes were fixed on the men. Kyle felt a rush of adrenaline. He wanted to yell out a warning, but something stopped him. Rocco wasn't just watching, he was waiting. Suddenly, one of the men pulled out a gun and waved it threateningly. The others started unloading their bags, dumping boxes of stolen goods onto the ground. Kyle's mind raced. This was a robbery, a dangerous one, and somehow, Rocco was right in the middle of it. At that moment, a sharp whistle cut through the air. Rocco's body snapped into action. He leapt forward, teeth bared, barking with authority. The men froze. For a moment, it seemed like the dog was going to attack. Then, a second whistle. Rocco stopped. His eyes locked onto the shadows at the edge of the lot, where a tall man in a police uniform stepped forward. "Freeze!" the officer shouted. The men panicked, scattering in all directions. Rocco chased after them with lightning speed. Kyle stood frozen, stunned. He had no idea this dog was connected to the police, or that he was part of a trained K9 unit. Suddenly, the pieces clicked into place. The chain, the perfect obedience, the terrifying speed. Rocco wasn't just any dog. He was a weapon, and the bullies had almost triggered a disaster by messing with him. Later that night, Kyle couldn't sleep. His mind replayed the scene again and again. He remembered the terrified look on the men's faces, the way Rocco had obeyed the commands instantly, and how Kyle and his friends had underestimated him completely. He felt a mix of fear and shame. What if things had gone wrong? What if Rocco had been forced to defend himself? What if the story ended very differently? The next day at school, Kyle found himself avoiding the usual crowd. He knew he had to fix this. He owed it to Rocco, to himself, to everyone. He couldn't keep acting like it was just a game, because this dog, this brutal K9, wasn't a joke. He was a protector, and sometimes, protectors don't get to choose the battles. They just have to fight. The next morning, Kyle's footsteps felt heavier than usual as he walked to school. The usual jokes and laughter from his friends felt distant, almost hollow. His mind was stuck on one thing: Rocco. He had to understand more about this dog. Why was Rocco chained up like a stray? Why hadn't the bullies realized who he really was? And most of all, why had no one tried to help the dog before? At lunch, Kyle finally worked up the courage to talk to a teacher he trusted, Mrs. Daniels, the science teacher who was known for loving animals. "Mrs. Daniels, can I ask you something about the dog by the school?" Kyle said, lowering his voice. She smiled warmly. "Sure, Kyle. What do you want to know?" Kyle hesitated, then explained everything: the bullying, the warehouse, the police officer, the chase. Mrs. Daniels listened carefully, nodding as Kyle spoke. When he finished, she said, "You know, Rocco isn't just any dog. He's a retired police K9. I heard about him from the town sheriff a few months ago." Kyle's eyes widened. "Retired?" "Yeah. After years of service, the department was going to place him in a new handler's home. But something happened. The officer who was supposed to take care of him had to move suddenly. So, Rocco ended up here, chained near the school." Kyle shook his head. "That's terrible. No one should keep a dog like that chained up like he's just a stray." Mrs. Daniels sighed. "I agree, but sometimes people don't realize the sacrifices these dogs make. Rocco served this town for years, chasing down dangerous criminals, protecting officers' lives. He deserves better." Kyle felt a spark inside him. If no one else was going to help Rocco, maybe he could. He thought back to the bullies, how cruel they were, how blind to the truth. He realized that Rocco's real battle wasn't with them, it was with being forgotten. That afternoon, Kyle approached Rocco's chain again, this time without fear or mockery. "Hey Rocco," he said softly, "I'm sorry about those guys. They didn't know who you really are." The dog lifted his head, eyes meeting Kyle's with quiet intelligence. For the first time, Kyle felt a connection. It was like Rocco was saying, "I understand." From that day, Kyle made a decision. He would do everything he could to change Rocco's life, to show the town the true hero chained behind a fence. But it wasn't easy. The school administration refused to get involved. Some parents complained that the dog was dangerous, and Kyle's friends teased him for wasting time on a dog. Worst of all, the bullies noticed Kyle's change in attitude. They started targeting him instead, pushing him in hallways, stealing his books. One afternoon, Kyle found a note slipped into his locker: "Stay away from the dog or else." Fear twisted in his stomach, but something stronger kept him going. He couldn't turn his back on Rocco. Kyle's first step was to learn everything about police dogs, what made them special, how they trained, and what happened when they retired. He spent hours online, reading stories of K9 officers who had saved lives, faced danger without hesitation, and shown loyalty that went beyond words. He discovered that police dogs were more than animals. They were partners, heroes in fur coats. Kyle wanted to be that partner for Rocco. He began talking to local animal rescue groups and police officers, asking questions and looking for help. At first, many said no. They didn't want to get involved with a dog that belonged to the department. But Kyle kept pushing. He even started a petition to get Rocco a better home and proper care. Slowly, the town started to notice. Some neighbors signed the petition. Others shared Kyle's posts on social media. Even the local news picked up the story. Suddenly, Rocco wasn't just a stray chained by a school fence. He was a symbol, a reminder of courage, loyalty, and the bonds we owe to those who protect us. But the bullies weren't going to give up easily. One evening, after school, Kyle heard them laughing behind the bleachers. He peeked around the corner, just in time to see them throwing rocks at Rocco's chained spot. "Let's see how tough he is now," one yelled. Kyle's heart raced. He wanted to run over, but he knew better. Rocco had taught him something important. Strength isn't just about force. It's about control. So, Kyle stepped forward, voice steady but loud. "Stop. Just stop." The bullies turned, surprised to see Kyle standing there. One sneered, "What are you going to do about it, hero?" Kyle met his gaze. "I'm not alone," he said. At that moment, a siren wailed in the distance. Rocco appeared from the shadows, calm but alert. The bullies froze. They knew now they'd picked the wrong dog to mess with. Kyle had never imagined his life would revolve around one dog, a dog many had forgotten, but who had a story that deserved to be told. After that tense moment with the bullies and Rocco's calm but firm presence, something inside Kyle changed. He realized this was more than just a fight against some mean kids. It was a fight to give Rocco the respect and care he deserved. That evening, Kyle sat down at his desk, opening his laptop. His fingers flew across the keyboard, typing a message to the local police department. "Hello, my name is Kyle, and I'm a student at Lincoln High School. I want to know more about the dog chained near our school. The German Shepherd named Rocco. I think he's a police dog, and I want to help." Days passed without a reply. Kyle wasn't discouraged. He kept trying, emailing again, calling the non-emergency line, even visiting the station in person. Finally, a reply came from Sergeant Hayes. "Thanks for reaching out, Kyle. Rocco is a retired K-9. He served with Officer Daniels for 7 years before his retirement. Unfortunately, the department doesn't have the resources to care for him now. If you want to help, I'd suggest connecting with local rescues." Kyle felt a mix of pride and sadness. Here was a hero dog who had risked his life for the community, now left to fend for himself. But Kyle wasn't ready to give up. He contacted every rescue group he could find. Some said they were full. Others said they couldn't take a dog with Rocco's training. They didn't have the right staff. One group, Paws for Justice, replied with hope. "We'd be interested in helping Rocco, but we'll need to meet him first." Kyle arranged to meet with Sarah, the lead volunteer at Paws for Justice. When Sarah arrived at the schoolyard, Rocco was suspicious at first. Years of being chained had made him cautious, but Sarah approached slowly, speaking in a soft voice. "I've worked with retired K-9s before," she said. "They're special dogs, but they need special care." She sat beside Rocco, letting him sniff her hand. Kyle watched, heart pounding. If Sarah could win Rocco's trust, maybe they could give him a better life. After a few minutes, Rocco relaxed, leaning into Sarah's hand. Sarah smiled. "He's strong, smart, and loyal, but he's also tired. Years of chasing bad guys and living on the edge have taken a toll." Kyle nodded. "What can we do?" Sarah explained that retired K-9s often struggle with adjusting to quiet lives. Their training means they're always alert, ready to act. They need calm homes, with people who understand their needs. "We'll need to get him a vet check, new gear, and start training for civilian life, basic walks, socializing, learning to trust again." That night, Kyle felt hope for the first time. Rocco's story was no longer forgotten. It was just beginning to be rewritten. But as they worked on getting Rocco out of his chains and into a better life, challenges piled up. The bullies didn't stop. They found new ways to harass Kyle, throwing trash at his locker, spreading rumors that he was dog crazy and weird. At school, some teachers warned Kyle to stay out of trouble. The principal even called Kyle's parents, concerned about his obsession with the dog. Kyle's world was shrinking, but his mission was growing. One afternoon, Sarah brought a team of volunteers to the school. They set up a temporary pen, fresh water bowls, blankets, and a new collar for Rocco. For the first time in years, Rocco was free from his chain. The volunteers worked patiently, letting Rocco explore the yard, slowly regaining confidence. Kyle watched as the dog who had once been chained and bullied began to wag his tail, sniff around, and even approach a few curious kids. But the bullies watched from the sidelines, their eyes full of anger. They planned something. Kyle overheard snippets of their conversation, a plan to trap Rocco and get him sent away forever. Fear surged through Kyle, but he refused to let it stop him. He told Sarah everything. The volunteers prepared to protect Rocco, setting up cameras and notifying local authorities. Despite the precautions, the bullies struck one night. They sneaked into the yard, trying to catch Rocco off guard. But Rocco was ready. His training kicked in. He barked sharply, growled low, a sound that sent chills down the spine. The bullies ran, stumbling over fences, terrified by the dog they had once mocked. Kyle arrived soon after, finding Rocco safe, but alert. It was a turning point. Word spread about the brave K-9 defending his new home. The community began to rally. Neighbors volunteered to help care for Rocco. Local businesses donated food and supplies. Kyle's friends started to see him differently, admiring his dedication and courage. But the biggest change came when Officer Daniels appeared. The retired K-9 handler came to see Rocco for the first time in months. His eyes filled with tears. "Rocco," he whispered, kneeling beside the dog. "I'm so sorry I couldn't be here." Rocco nuzzled him, calm and familiar. Together, Kyle, Sarah, and Officer Daniels worked to find Rocco a forever home, one that would honor his service and give him the love he deserved. After Officer Daniels came back into the picture, things started to shift again, but not always in the ways Kyle expected. Officer Daniels wasn't just any handler. He was the man who had trained Rocco from a young pup. He had been with Rocco through countless tough situations, from chasing down dangerous criminals to comforting victims in distress. The bond they shared was unbreakable, but after Rocco retired, Daniels had been forced to leave him behind. Budget cuts and lack of resources meant the department couldn't keep Rocco. He had been passed off to the school for temporary care. but everyone knew that was a stopgap at best. Now, Daniels was determined to make things right. He met with Kyle and Sarah at the local animal shelter, where Rocco was staying temporarily. "Rocco deserves more than this," Daniels said quietly. "I've seen what he can do, what he's been through. I want to get him into a program for retired K9s, somewhere he can live with dignity." Kyle listened closely. He admired Daniels' dedication, but he also knew it wouldn't be easy. Programs like that were rare. They required funding, space, and staff trained to handle dogs like Rocco, dogs who had spent years on high alert, always ready to face danger. While Daniels worked on finding a suitable home for Rocco, Kyle and Sarah focused on helping Rocco adjust. They introduced small routines to help calm him: long walks in quiet parks, gentle play with soft toys, and plenty of rest. Rocco wasn't used to peace. He flinched at sudden noises, stayed alert even when there was no danger, and sometimes refused to eat when things got too noisy. Kyle learned to read Rocco's signals: a twitch of the ear, a flicker of the eyes, signs that meant Rocco needed space or comfort. At school, Kyle's classmates began to notice the change too. Some started to approach Rocco with curiosity instead of fear. A few brave kids even brought treats, hoping to earn a wag or a lick. But the bullies weren't done yet. They saw Kyle's growing circle of friends and support as a threat. They started targeting Sarah and the volunteers, leaving nasty notes, damaging the shelter supplies, even spreading rumors that Rocco was dangerous. It was a tough time. Sarah confided in Kyle one afternoon, her voice shaking. "We're doing good work, but we need the community behind us. If the bullies keep pushing, they'll wear us down." Kyle nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle heavily on his shoulders. That's when he had an idea. If the community didn't understand Rocco's story, maybe they'd never see him as anything but a scary dog. Kyle decided to share Rocco's journey with the world. He started recording videos, simple clips of Rocco's daily life, his training exercises, moments of calm and play. He interviewed Officer Daniels about Rocco's service and sacrifice. He even gathered stories from neighbors who had witnessed Rocco in action during his K9 days. The videos were honest and raw, not flashy or overly produced, just real moments that showed Rocco's true heart. Slowly, the tide began to turn. People who once ignored Rocco started commenting with support and encouragement. Local news caught wind of the story and reached out for interviews. One afternoon, Kyle got a call from a reporter. "We want to feature Rocco's story in the community paper," she said. "This could be the break we need." With more eyes on Rocco, the bullies found it harder to cause trouble without backlash. Parents at the school began speaking up, urging the principal to support Kyle's efforts. Teachers started including lessons about respect and kindness in their classes, using Rocco as a real-life example. The school's attitude shifted slowly, but surely. Despite the progress, Rocco still faced challenges. His health was not perfect. Years of service had left scars, both physical and emotional. One evening, Sarah noticed Rocco limping. She immediately scheduled a vet appointment. The vet's diagnosis was sobering. Rocco had arthritis and some old injuries that would need ongoing care. Kyle and Sarah realized that helping Rocco meant more than just finding him a home. It meant committing to his health and happiness for the rest of his life. As weeks passed, Rocco's condition improved with treatment and love. His spirit brightened. The once chained and neglected dog now enjoyed slow walks, soft beds, and gentle pats. His eyes, once wary, began to sparkle with trust. Kyle often sat beside him, talking quietly. "You're not just a dog, Rocco," he said softly. "You're a hero." But the biggest test was still ahead. One day, the bullies made their boldest move yet. They spread rumors that Rocco had attacked a child. The school exploded with panic and fear. Parents demanded action. The principal called an emergency meeting. Kyle felt his heart break. Could all their hard work be undone? Officer Daniels stepped in. He brought official records proving Rocco's calm nature around kids and the falsehood of the rumors. He spoke passionately about the dog's years of service, the loyalty he showed, and how misunderstood retired K9s often were. His words made a difference. The meeting ended with a promise. Rocco would be allowed to stay, under careful supervision, until a permanent home was found. That night, Kyle sat with Rocco, exhausted but hopeful. The journey was far from over, but they had come so far. He looked at Rocco's tired but trusting eyes and knew one thing for sure. No matter what challenges came next, this dog would never face them alone. Days turned into weeks, and the small victories piled up. Kyle, Sarah, and Officer Daniels worked tirelessly, making sure Rocco's story stayed alive in the community's heart. But it wasn't just about spreading a story anymore. It was about building a future for a dog who had given so much. Rocco, now calmer, began showing signs of his old self. The sharp alertness in his eyes softened, replaced with a gentle warmth, reserved for those he trusted. Yet, his instincts remained razor-sharp, something Kyle never forgot when he took Rocco for walks around the neighborhood. One afternoon, while on a stroll near a busy street, Rocco suddenly stiffened. His ears pricked up, muscles tensing as he stared intently across the road. Kyle followed his gaze and spotted a man hurriedly darting through traffic, glancing nervously over his shoulder. Before Kyle could react, Rocco had slipped his leash and was bounding across the street. People gasped. Cars screeched to a halt. Kyle sprinted after him, heart pounding. Rocco caught up to the man, nudging him down gently but firmly. The man froze, eyes wide, as Rocco stared directly into his face. Calm, commanding, powerful. It turned out the man was a known thief who'd been reported in the area. Rocco's instincts hadn't failed. He held the man until the police arrived. That day, Kyle realized something profound. Rocco's training was never really gone. It was just waiting for the right moment to shine again. Even retired, he was still a protector at heart. But that moment also brought new challenges. The local authorities, while grateful, started raising concerns about Rocco's presence on the streets. Some worried he was still a danger. They suggested stricter controls, even questioning if Rocco should be allowed around the school. Kyle knew it was time to take things further. Rocco deserved a permanent place, a home where he could be safe, respected, and loved. Kyle, Sarah, and Officer Daniels began reaching out to organizations specializing in retired service dogs. They made phone call after phone call, sending emails, sharing videos, and telling Rocco's story with passion and hope. One day, a response came from a nonprofit called Second Chance K9s. They specialized in placing retired police dogs into loving foster homes and provided lifelong medical care. The nonprofit wanted to meet Rocco. Kyle felt a surge of hope. The meeting was emotional. Volunteers knelt down to greet Rocco, and as soon as he wagged his tail, Kyle knew this was the right place. The team explained the process. Rocco would be assessed, treated for his arthritis, and paired with a family experienced in caring for retired K9 dogs. But it wasn't just about finding any family. They wanted the perfect match, someone who understood the unique needs of a dog like Rocco. Meanwhile, the bullies who had once tormented Rocco were growing quieter. The community's support had made their cruelty less acceptable. But Kyle wasn't naive. He knew there might be setbacks. One afternoon, as Kyle was leaving the shelter, he spotted one of the bullies lurking nearby. The boy's eyes held a mix of resentment and fear. Instead of confrontation, Kyle approached calmly. "Why do you keep doing this?" he asked softly. The boy looked away, mumbling, "I don't know. It's just hard to see him like this." Kyle nodded, sensing there was more beneath the surface. Rocco's been through a lot too. He's not just some dog. He's a fighter, a protector. The boy's expression softened. "I guess I didn't see it that way." That moment sparked something unexpected. Kyle began organizing meet and greets where kids could spend time with Rocco, learn about his training, and understand his journey. The bullies weren't invited at first, but one by one, they showed up, curious, hesitant, maybe even a little ashamed. Through these interactions, walls began to break down. Rocco's gentle nature and calm demeanor won over even the toughest skeptics. The bullies transformed from tormentors to protectors in training, learning respect and empathy in ways no lecture could teach. As Rocco's adoption day approached, Kyle felt a mix of pride and sadness. He had grown attached to the dog who had become a friend, a teacher, and a symbol of resilience. The family who would take Rocco and was ready to give him the peaceful life he deserved, but saying goodbye wasn't easy. On the final day, Kyle knelt down, looking into Rocco's eyes. "You did more than just survive," he said quietly. "You changed lives. You taught us all what it means to be brave." Rocco nuzzled his hand, tail wagging slowly, a silent thank you. And with that, Rocco's new chapter began. A chapter filled with love, care, and the rest he had earned. But the story of the dog who was once bullied, yet stood strong, would live on, reminding everyone that true strength is found not just in muscle, but in heart. It all came down to one unforgettable afternoon, the moment when everything changed, when the true power and courage of Rocco, the so-called harmless stray, would finally be put to the ultimate test. Kyle was walking Rocco near the school, the same place where it had all begun, the place where bullies had mocked and thrown stones at him. The sun was dipping low, casting long shadows over the playground. The air was quiet, almost too quiet. Suddenly, A sharp scream pierced the silence. Kyle's heart jumped. He sprinted toward the sound, Rocco right by his side, muscles coiled like springs ready to explode. They found a younger kid cornered near the edge of the playground. A group of teenagers, the very same bullies from before, were surrounding him, their faces twisted with anger and cruelty. The boy's eyes were wide with fear. Kyle shouted, "Hey, leave him alone." But the bullies didn't back down. In that split second, Rocco stepped forward, every muscle tense, every nerve alive. His lips curled back, teeth bared in a low growl, a sound that sent a chill through the bullies. They had forgotten who they were dealing with. Rocco lunged, not to attack, but to protect. His presence alone was commanding, a force impossible to ignore. The bullies stumbled back, startled by the fierce K9 who moved with such precision and power. One of them tried to grab a rock, but before he could, Rocco was there, blocking the path with a strong body, eyes locked on the threat. Kyle rushed in to help the younger boy, pulling him away from danger. The bullies, now shaken and outmatched, scattered, running away faster than ever before. Rocco stood tall, not a single scratch on him, but his stance said it all. This dog was no ordinary stray. He was a guardian, a hero. In that moment, the community's doubts vanished. Everyone who had once dismissed Rocco as just another dog realized his true nature. Kyle later said, "That day, Rocco didn't just defend a kid. He defended every one of us who had ever underestimated him. And the boy he saved, he never forgot it either." From that day on, the bullies never dared cross Rocco again. They had learned the hard way that some strength can't be judged by looks alone. The story of Rocco isn't just about a dog standing up to bullies. It's about something much deeper. It's about how often we judge others by what we see on the surface and miss the incredible strength that lies beneath. Rocco looked like a stray to most people, alone, quiet, maybe even a little rough around the edges. But what he truly was, a trained K9 officer, brave and loyal, remained hidden until the moment he was needed the most. That day, when those teenagers decided to pick on the wrong dog, they didn't just face a fierce protector. They faced justice. They faced a living reminder that courage doesn't come in a fancy package or flashy clothes. It comes from the heart. For Kyle, Rocco wasn't just a companion. He was a symbol of trust and resilience. Together, they showed the world that loyalty means standing by someone, no matter the challenge. And for the community, Rocco's story became a lesson about kindness, respect, and the power of not underestimating someone or something based on first impressions. The bullies learned the hard way that cruelty has consequences, but Rocco also taught us all something else, that real strength protects the weak, defends the innocent, and never backs down from standing up for what's right. It's easy to look at a stray dog and see nothing but another lonely animal, but Rocco proved that every dog, like every person, carries a story worth knowing, stories filled with courage, heartbreak, and sometimes unexpected heroism. So next time you see a dog wandering the streets, or a quiet figure sitting alone, remember this: there might be more to their story than you realize. And sometimes, the bravest souls are the ones who seem the most invisible. If you believe every dog deserves a chance, hit subscribe and see more amazing stories like Rocco's.